57talk.com, Gary Cubetta, Scottsdale, Arizona. My guest once again, the legendary, the famous Buck Robley from Arkansas. Buck, pleasure to have you with us.
Well, Gary, I'm glad you and your listeners enjoy having me on your air with you. What are we talking about today, Gary? What is everybody wondering and thinking about what the Colonel's up to next?
Colonel Buck Robley. Colonel, we're going to talk about your relationship with the late, great Frank Goodish, Bruiser Brody. In wrestling, you were one of the closest people to Bruiser Brody. You know the inside stories. Let's talk about it right now.
You know that Bruiser Brody and I, you're very, very correct what you say, Gary. You know, I met the man in the early 70s. He had broken in over around San Antone with Gary Hart and Fritz Von Erich. And Fritz, being an ignorant promoter he said, well, this guy can't draw any money. I don't want him. He's just a big old guy that was an ex-football player, which was true. He played football for the Washington Redskins under the legendary coach of Vince Lombardi. And Frank told me, he says, Buck, when I got to Washington Redskins, he said, I was uncoachable. He said, I could play the game, I was good at it, but nobody could control me. I was uncoachable. He said that one season I played with the Redskins and Vince Lombardi, he said, changed my life. So he comes down to Louisiana, and Fritz says he can't wrestle. Fritz said he wasn't nothing. So I got word a couple of days early that he was going to come into our area. Grizzly Smith approached me and said, I want you to see if you can't do something with this guy. At the time, I was the hottest heel in Louisiana. I'd set the place on fire with Ken Mantell. And we were in a little town east of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, called La Ranger, Louisiana. And there was a local promoter up there that hustled a little town, and he could draw about 12, 15, maybe 1,800 people into his arena. So one Saturday night I was there, and I was the main event in La Ranger. And I went out and beat somebody, and I was just going on through, beating them a little bit more, and then all of a sudden a guy out of the crowd jumped up.
Your call.
And it startled me. I stopped, I stepped back, my eyes looked like silver dollars. I said, my God, who is this monster? And he walked up to the ring, and I walked over to the ring ropes, and I was ready to nail him. Because everybody that come into that ring was my meat. As he stepped up on that ring, he took a huge swing, and I just ducked. And probably it's the best move I ever made in my life, because he would have tore my head off. He started rattling them ropes, and he was trying to come in, and I said, no, I can't challenge this man. And I scooted out of the ring, and they give him the microphone, and naturally he challenged me. And I said, nobody can challenge this man. I am the king of Louisiana. I am the champion. I'll take care of you. What's your name? He said, my name's Frank Goodish. I'm a newspaper reporter becoming a wrestler. And I laughed in his face. A newspaper reporter? He says, I work for the San Antonio newspaper, and I'm going to be a professional wrestler, and you're going to be my first opponent. So I took this with a grain of salt, and I said, we'll make a match. As I told Grizzly Smith, give me a couple of weeks to get myself physically and mentally prepared for this man. He said, I'm going to make this match in a couple of weeks, and it's going to happen right here in La Ranger. So as we end up coming back to La Ranger in a couple of weeks, I can't remember the promoter. His name was Skeet or Skewett or something like that. And we turned people away. First time ever.
Now, wait, Buck, did Frank wrestle on TV? Any squash? Nothing, huh?
No TV.
So who even knew who he... So why would anyone care to show up to see him?
Well, because I was that hot. I controlled everything.
Okay.
They hated me. They wanted to see somebody big enough to crawl in that ring with me and give me the due punishment that I had coming to me.
And they thought this kid could do it.
They thought after they saw that man swing that big fist and paw at my head, and I was just lucky to get under it, there was a swish of air. The crowd knew this man would ever get his hands on Buck Robley.
Now, he had never wrestled before this match?
He's only had a few matches in Texas.
Okay, and Fritz...
Just tune-ups that Fritz said he would never make it.
Okay, so he had a couple matches. Here he goes against you. What happens?
As he goes against me, he's just like going against a brick wall. He didn't know what to do. He was just a big, huge body in the ring. I tried to maneuver him around, tried to get him to listen to me, tried to tell him things to do, to get the crowd with him, to keep him on his side, to respond to what I was doing. We put a match together. We might have got 8-10 minutes out of it, Gary, and then I had the ring fill up with the other heels, and we started taking the big man down. He didn't know how to sell. He didn't know how to register. He just tried to listen to what I had to say. And we got out of the ring, got to our separate dressing rooms. Then I told Grizzly Smith, I said, when we get over to Baton Rouge, send this kid by my motel room. I need to sit down and talk with him. He did come by that evening. He was a little nervous, a little cocky, and said, look, he said, I don't know anything about wrestling. I've had a few matches. Gary Hart arranged this to come over here, and he says, I want to learn. And he was a bodybuilder at the same time. He was going to the gym every day, training hard, and he had some back problems. So as his back kept acting up with him, he would cancel. He'd be off for 2-3 weeks. So during that time that he wasn't wrestling, wasn't doing anything, I just kind of tutored with him, talked with him. By that time, I think Stan Hansen had come in the area. Stan knew him from his football days at West Texas University out there in Amarillo, where the Funks are from, and Hansen and I were together in Texas many years ago. So Hansen had a relationship with him. He kind of talked with him, and finally his back got to a position where he could do more mobile things, and we started with him, got him in the ring, put him and Hansen together, and I think Grizzly Smith and that Brown boy, Luke Brown, I think was the boy's name then, might have started wrestling with him, trying to teach him, but it wasn't going anywhere. All the meantime, I was still working with Mantell and talking with Frank and building up his confidence and just telling him, listen, slow down, things will work. You need to start watching me every night in the ring. You got to learn how to put your repertoire of everybody in this dressing room into your repertoire. Something everybody does will benefit you down the road someday. So naturally, the only person he cared about was me and watching me, because I had the psychology. I could control the crowd. I had him where I needed him. I could turn him up. I could turn him down. I could make him laugh. I could make him cry. I could have him rush the ring to kill me. I had that kind of control and psychology with those people sitting out at ringside and in the bleachers. So he learned that. He says, my God, you can do this. You can handle these people. And I said, it's not only that. You got to be able to handle the guy in the ring you're with. You got to learn to go along and try to call a match. Even though some guys don't want you to be the leader, they don't even want you to put your hands on them because you're too stiff. They don't like that. And he asked me about that. I said, it's good to be stiff. Be firm. Let them know that you're not scared of them. He was scared of nobody in the ring. As our relationship built and went along, we traveled the roads together. As we built this relationship, he watched, he learned, and he could do a lot of things. By this time, he's got his own crew that he brought in. So he took Brody, myself, and he sent us to the north end of the territory, which was Wichita Falls, Texas, Oklahoma City, Fort Smith, Arkansas, 3 or 4 nights a week, paid us no money. We happened to live with a lady friend of mine up in Tulsa that was a school teacher, had 2 children that she adored. She took us in to help us as we struggled. But he was still at the same time, we had Danny Hodge we had to wrestle against. Hodge didn't want nothing to do with him. I can't remember who all they had up on that north end. But it didn't make any difference what they had. The main thing was Bruiser was learning how to wrestle. And nobody wanted to wrestle with him.
Now, well, hold on, Buck. Was he Frank Goodish or Frank Brody or Bruiser Brody at the time?
He was Bruiser Brody, Frank Goodish. They called him both names.
Had he gone to New York yet?
No.
Okay, so you're getting him ready for what would eventually be a trip to New York in
New
76.
York. After he stays with me, this territory, Louisiana, where all the big houses were, he called for me to come back. I had to come back down south, do an angle, because all the heat was on me, and Watts didn't realize that. So I went back down, and that's when I become the colonel. I managed everybody from whoever he had from the first match to the last match. As this went on, Frank said, what do you think I should do? I said, you need to go get experience. I said, you need to call Gary in Fort Worth or Dallas and see if they'll take you back. See if you can't find yourself a little time somewhere. You've got some matches under your belt. Just remember what I'm telling you. So he leaves. He goes back to Dallas. He stays in Dallas a short period of time. They don't have no room for him because Fritz was too busy promoting Dallas with his kids and whatever else he had for talent. Gary Hart was his booker then. So lo and behold, they get a little job up in New York. New York wants to be Brody. Frank was big, but then he had already had the rabbit fur around his boots. He had the big old vest. Had his hair like he always had it in a big ponytail, just a big monstrous man.
Now let's stop here because in 1976, back in New York, only the biggest stars would come in. Frank had only been wrestling for a year, maybe less?
Maybe a year, maybe 8 months, maybe a little bit more, Gary. I'm not sure exactly in my time frame.
Were you surprised that he got called up?
I was surprised he even went to New York.
Why?
Well, one reason, because I knew he could wrestle. And the talent in New York at that time was Bruno Sammartino and whatever else they had, Gorilla Monsoon. They weren't wrestlers. They were just big people like Bruiser Brody that worked in populated cities.
Yeah, but they had big names. They had Ivan Koloff, Ernie Ladd. They had the big names.
Well, they had big people, big names for that area. Koloff, Ivan Koloff wouldn't draw your house where I was at because he couldn't work.
But they had big names, and Bruiser Brody was not any type of name.
He wasn't a name, but he was a body.
He was a body.
And that's all you had to be to go to New York, was a body.
Okay.
That's what they wanted. They wanted a body for Bruno, Gorilla. I don't know who they had up there. Like I said, they just were looking for somebody to beat up.
So he
he wasn't just a guy who was going to go up and lay down on the mat for you.
Okay, now he goes up to New York, makes a big impression, gets a match against Bruno in the Garden. All this time he must be talking to you on the phone, right?
We're back and forth.
What's he saying?
He's asking me what goes on. How should I handle myself? What should I do? He's already done a favor for him. I don't know if you ever knew that. He did a favor for him. He put maybe Bruno over. I don't know who he put over. I can't remember. And he did a favor for somebody. So here's how it happened in New York. He did the favor. The favor is supposed to be returned to him. This is where Vince Sr. and Gorilla Monsoon, who was booking the territory at the time, lied to him. When it come down to doing the favor, whoever he's going to wrestle was Bruno, a Gorilla in the Garden. It didn't happen. That's where all the problems started. That's where they said he was a troublemaker. Nobody was going to fight or book him. He didn't have a clue what he was doing. He was just a big guy that wasn't going to put people over. That's what the reputation started. It started out of New York as that, which was altogether wrong. They lied to the man. They said, we're going to do this with you. If you'll do this for us, we're going to do this for you. Well, it never happened, and he told me that he got so upset and so mad that he took a cab someplace, and he was going down to TV, and he was going to kick some butt. It didn't make any difference. I think it was down in Pennsylvania where they were taping those shows. He caught him a cab out of somewhere Went all the way down there, and he said the time he got down there, he just thought it over in his head, and he said no, and he left. Now he leaves. He's got no place to go. New York, I guess, is kind of knocking him. He asked me, he asked Gary Hart, is there any place I can go to learn? Gary says, what do you think about Australia? Frank said, what do you mean Australia? He says, look, he says, there's Mark Lewin, Curtis Ikea down there. You can go down there, you're not going to get rich, but you can learn, and you can learn under two good guys. Curtis and Lewin and I had been to Japan together many times. I knew them both. I told Frank, I said, go down there. So in the meantime, I stay in Louisiana. I'm booking Louisiana. We're doing good. He goes off to Australia. I don't hear from him.
Well, now let me stop you, Buck, because I saw Frank wrestle in New York back east in '76. He came up to par so fast. He was excellent at that point. But you're saying he still had more to learn about the business.
Well, everybody, you learn every day, Gary. I don't know, when you say you saw him, I assume you lived in that area.
Yeah.
And you were a fan, and he didn't stay long in your area.
He was there for about 4 or 5 months. He made a big impact. It was his only trip to the Worldwide Wrestling Federation.
Right.
But he was good at that time. So it's not, he didn't get thrown out of the East Coast because he was green, as you said.
No, he got thrown out because they lied to him and he went after him.
So he goes to Australia.
He leaves New York, comes back home, says, I need to do something, so we got him into Australia. He goes to Australia, and he gets under Mark Lewin and King I. Curtis's wings. And they were told ahead of time, look, we're sending a big man down there. He can work. He can do anything. You need to show him some other things. Of course, you know, with those two, it was only one thing. Tape it onto your finger, carry it in your mouth, and use it. And learn how to interview. King Curtis might have been the greatest interviewer outside of Brody that I knew. And Frank learned a lot down there. In the meantime, I had split with Bill Watts, and I'd gone to Kansas City. As